Fantastic. Good afternoon, everybody. Bonjour to, I believe it's good afternoon or good morning to some and good evening to others. Bonjour and bonsoir to those listening on the live simultaneous French interpretation. My name is Simba Chitapi. I will be moderating this afternoon's discussion. And the title of this afternoon session is the PIDA Service Delivery Mechanism, Support to Advance Infrastructure Projects and Preparation. And the overall purpose of this afternoon session is to give a recap of what the SDM is, the Service Delivery Mechanism, and to give some examples of how that and some of its constituent components have been used in the project preparation and development of specific projects. And this afternoon we have two speakers. Our first speaker is Mr. Ibrahim Wahabu, who is the lead for private sector development and infrastructure project preparation at outer NEPAD, who will give us a brief overview of the SDM and its constituents and its constituent components, tell us what it is and give us that overview. And then he will be followed by Dr. Morgan Pillay, who is a senior advisor in GIZ's support to outer NEPAD. And so with that, I would like to invite Mr. Wahabu to begin his presentation on the PIDA service delivery mechanism. Sorry, can I just, before you go ahead, I just wanted to remind listeners that we have had several sessions on this or on its components, but I think Ibra will make allusions to that in his presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Program Director, and good afternoon, good morning, good evening to everyone around the world, and welcome to the conversation. I think we have heard, a lot about the PIDA service delivery mechanism. We hear about the PIDA quality level. So the objective of this session is really to illustrate and to articulate further what the SDM is and how are we working to support regional infrastructure project and specifically PIDA project, and what have we done during the year 2020. My slide will be articulated in this point. The first part of the presentation will consist of presenting the service delivery mechanism and the methodology we use to screen a project and so that we can provide evidence-based advisory services and assistance for their preparation. And then I will talk again about the PIDA quality level, and I will zoom out to allow my colleague, Dr. Morgan Pillay, to come and present us 4 case studies on projects that we have worked on during the year. And then we will hand over to you, Program Director. If, for example, colleagues from those specific regions are in the room, they can also, complement what we will say on the project. And then we can also take questions if there is question. Thank you. So like the program moderator said, the objective of this session is really to present the SDM and the case study, but more importantly, our goal is to share experience and to learn from you, and then to enhance the way we operate in supporting PIDA project. As a genesis, I think on the screen you see the rationale for the service delivery mechanism. So the SDM is established through an African Union decision. Because project preparation, we have been talking about it through this PIDA week and the previous one. This decision is really illustrating the fact that it's not only a technical discussion. At the highest level of decision making in Africa, head of state are very aware of the challenge, and that's why they took the decision to establish the service delivery mechanism to specifically target the issue around early stage project preparation. What is the early stage project preparation in our conversation is really from the project definition, creating enabling environment, and ensuring that all the pre-feasibility studies are done properly so that the project can move smoothly to the next stage. The SDM's objective or goal are really three types. One is to provide a systemic process of screening, analyzing, and identifying needs of PIDA projects, because that's lacking. If you take a project, for example, that's stuck in the same stage of development for 5 years, the objective of the SDM is to look at that project and to undertake some kind of surgery on the project and to identify which part of the project is not well and which intervention require for the project to move and potentially see the light. So this is one of the objectives, diagnosing the project. Secondly is, in doing so, because of the multitude of the practice in the industry, at least for Africa, we would like to provide a standard of excellence in early stage project preparation through the SDM. So this is our second ambition in design the service delivery mechanism. And finally is to leverage financial resources and the capacity through our strategic partnership and through existing instruments within AUD and EPAD and within our partner institutions. What is the methodology? So on the screen, you have the SDM methodology to, like I said, undertake that surgical intervention on a project and identify specifically what's wrong and what can we do on the project. And this methodology is really based on best practice internationally. I mean, the World Bank has its, particularly IFC, they do have the methodology they use to screen projects. The UN Economic Commission, for example, for Asia and the Pacific, they have an interesting methodology they use to screen projects. The European External Investment Plan, they have selection criteria on how they admit projects. Our various development finance institutions on the continent, like AFDB, DBSA, Afrexim Bank, they do have their own criteria to screen projects. So in designing the SDM screening methodology, we really have in mind three aspects. One aspect is that our mandate. Our nature is that we are a development organization. We are primarily driven by the developmental goal of Africa. Secondly, we are mindful of the existing those practices, so we need to take them into account. And thirdly, though we are dealing with publicly originated projects, ultimately funding will come in part from private sector, so we need to take into account the private sector interest. With that in mind, we designed the methodology in, first of all, categorizing project characteristics in two lenses: the strategic context of the project and the project itself. And in the context, as you can see, we are dealing issue around how much is the project a priority within a region. So this issue around political support of the project and how the project is aligned with the African sustainability goals or with the Africa Agenda 2063 or the regional economic community specific development plan pertaining to infrastructure or trade development and poverty alleviation. Secondly, in terms of the context, we look at the sector readiness. For example, issue around policy harmonization, regulation, and the sector maturity or the organization sponsoring the project. And then the private sector appetite, like issue around the country risk, because the specific nature of the country is very important. And then on the project itself, you have two components. One is the traditional technical viability of the project, including financial, environmental, and social governance. and the risk allocation around the project. And finally, public-private partnership. Now, on the right side of the screen, you can see an example of that dashboard where we can see what's the problem. This is for illustrative purpose, and you can see on the web, the spider web chart, on this particular project, like I said, it's an illustration. The technical viability is a problem. That's where the maximum problem is. Now, if we say that the technical viability is the problem of the project, this is only the visible part of the iceberg, which is our methodology. We have an arsenal, if I can say, of dashboard where we have hundreds of questions. And then we will go there again to zoom and see within the technical viability, what is contributing to this lower score on this particular project. And then we will do like this up to we reach the level where we will make sure that precisely this is the problem, and then we design a solution to address that problem. Now I would like to talk about the PIDA quality level. As I said, one of the ambition of the SDM is to design or to come up with a standard of quality in early stage project preparation in Africa. And by early stage, as I said, it's a matter of from the enabling environment up to the feasibility of the project. And the PIDA quality level is a recognition that AUD and EPAD award to project. If a project went through that robust methodology I just presented, then we can confidently say that at each level, the project has met this quality standard. And we keep emphasizing on the fact that this quality level is on a learning curve. So we are learning by doing, by screening project, we are learning a lot and we are refining the methodology. The quality level has 3 levels. The quality level has 3 levels. The first level is on the definition stage of the project up to pre-feasibility. So if a project has met the necessary needs in terms of enabling environment and pre-feasibility and project definition, we award the project to PIDA quality level 1. If the project now moved to full feasibility and is ready to move to project structuring, then we award the project to PIDA quality 2. And then when the project has full feasibility and bankability, that where the PIDA quality level 3 is awarded. For now, in 2020, our whole operation has been consisted in awarding PIDA quality level 1. Because like I said, the early stage of the project preparation is the most challenging. So you can see this is our process, how the project is selected. So potentially we admit the project through later with the project communication, I will say, with the project sponsor, where they submit an application form, and then we examine some entry level, like what we call project notification, and then we screen the project, we evaluate the project, we engage with the project sponsor up to the development of the project concept memo. If the project concept memorandum is developed, then the project is qualified for the PIDA quality level 1. From the project concept memorandum, we will identify some specific action, and I'm sure Morgan will come on that, which will lead us to the deployment of expertise. And after the operation, hopefully we will move to the PIDA quality level 2 and 3. In terms of timeline of our operation, this is the way it is. As you can see, without any constraint, in 35 days, we will be able, 35 working days, we will be able to develop a project concept memorandum and then deploy expertise to address the issue that we will identify. I have to emphasize on the fact that the way SDM operates is different from the traditional project preparation facilities. We do not disburse fund or grant or loan to project sponsor. we have an expert service pool, the SDM expert service pool, which is a team of experts competitively recruited that are on standby and that have been supporting us to address issues. So whenever a need is identified on the project, this shorten the procurement and all the administrative process. We will work with the project sponsor, and then we will deploy the expertise. They will solve the problem and they will move to the next. It's a very smooth operation process. This is the end of my part of the presentation, highlighting what the SDM is, how the process is. I would now call upon my colleague, Dr. PIDA, to take us through 4 case studies that we work on in 2020. Over to you, Dr. PIDA. Thank you so much for your kind attention.
Thank you, Ibra. Can we have the next slide? So, colleagues, what we have here is the intimate detail of how a project concept memorandum is constructed, what it contains in terms of the project description, the sector, readiness, PPP attractiveness, project evaluation, and recommendations. So this is a report that's compiled through the quick check methodology, and we've tested it through many projects. We have screened almost 80 projects during 2020, and we are working with about 12 projects at the moment, and about 4 that has reached PIDA quality label 1, meaning that we have issued a project concept memorandum for those. An important document in that process is a commitment letter, which illustrates the type of support that the SDM will provide. So now I'm going to quickly talk to a few projects, 4 projects, and the idea is just to give you a sense of the type of project, what were some of the key things, and the slides can be shared with you. However, in a discussion like this, we're not able to provide you with full comprehensive details surrounding the project. The first project is the Kisian Busia Road and the Kakira Malaba Road. This project is part of the Northern Corridor, consists of a multi-nodal network of road, rail, and inland waterways, transport connecting member states in Burundi, Democratic Republic of Congo, Kenya, Rwanda, South Sudan, and Uganda to the port of Mombasa. Now, this project essentially has 2 components. It has a Kenyan segment, which is the Kisian Busia Road, and then it has the second component, which is the Uganda segment. The Kenyan segment is about 104 kilometers, and the Ugandan segment is 127 kilometers. Now, important in this project, we have an implementing authority in place, and that makes it all the easier to access information, getting decisions, and certainly the EAC Secretariat has been very robust in their communications and discussions with us. The CapEx required at this stage, it's still early days, but the CapEx estimate at this stage is about $286 million US, and the project has significant trade and transport implications along the corridor, and it will contribute significantly to regional integration. Now, in terms of SDM, what is it we are providing as a support? The first layer of support has been to conduct the assessment. We showed the gap analysis to the implementing authority, and there's a fundamental understanding of what the way forward should be. And part of the way forward was advisory support on some transport traffic studies and firming up some of the numbers associated with the pre-feasibility type reports. And that's what our expert service pool is currently doing. And they're doing it on the basis that the next step would be to approach PPFs for funding for the full feasibility of the project. I'm now going to move to the next project, which is the Lesotho Botswana Water Transfer Project. This project is again aligned to the SADC water strategy, and in this case involving 3 countries, Lesotho, Botswana, and South Africa. The project entails a multi-purpose dam along the Makuleng River in Lesotho, which will yield 200 cubic meters per annum, 200 million cubic liters per annum. Sorry about that. It also includes a conveyancing system from Lesotho via South Africa to Botswana. Again, we worked through the Orasicom, who's the implementing authority, coordinating activities between the different countries. And I think through that interaction, we were able to progress very quickly on this project. Capital cost on this project is about 2.72 euros in billions. And certainly our role in SDM at this stage is to provide a review service for the key documents that have already been produced via the feasibility studies, and further feasibility studies have been funded or will be funded by the African Development Bank. Our role going forward will include drafting terms of reference, possibly for financial appraisal, and also to secure funding for the project in the future, particularly private sector engagement in this project. If we can get to the third project, Ibra, next slide. It's the Osio-Bangi-N'Djamena multimodal corridor. Now, this is a part of the Kinshasa-Brazzaville-Bangui-N'Djamena corridor, which is a regional priority. It connects 4 capitals and gives car and Chad access to the sea through Point Noir in the Congo and Matidi in the DRC. So it's quite an important regional project connecting many of the countries. But primarily in this project, the aim is to connect and give car and Chad access to the sea through Point Noir, or in Congo in Matidi in the DRC. It also involves interstate transport to make these connections. And in this case, we have ECAS as the implementing authority, and we're working quite extensively. And hopefully in the near future, there will be more discussions about a coordinated approach in terms of a implementing authority that can work on behalf of the 3 countries. In terms of capital, $2.6 billion is an estimate for CapEx. And here the role of SDM has been primarily to review, probably provide financial appraisal, and also secure intent from IFIs and private sector for financing. Our final project, which is the Numbil multi-purpose dam. Ibra?
Yes, Morgan, I'm trying to move forward with the slide.
Okay, there we are, thank you. It's a multi-purpose dam located in the Burkina Faso, near the border with Ghana, which is part of the Volta Basin. Now, this is an older project, but it has come through because there has been information that has come forward. We've had lots of discussion with the Volta Basin Authority, which have provided the information. While the project constitutes a dam and some hydropower elements, we need to move forward to try and update the existing feasibility studies that have been done, because they are now outdated. So much of our role in this project is trying to get the countries to work together so that we can come up with an arrangement between the participating countries on updating the feasibility studies and then getting commitment from possible financiers on this project. The estimated capex on this project is $364 million US. Now, I mean, I know I've run through these projects very quickly and provided some very basic steps of what we've achieved so far in PIDA Quality Label 1. But behind these projects, there's significant documentation that exists, significant interaction with the project owners and project sponsors. And as a result, the cooperation is now moving towards PIDA Quality Label 2. Hopefully, part of the process that Ibra explained is that we're hoping with the member state support going forward, we can increase the number of projects that we screen and assess on an annual basis, and we can start to accelerate the pace of early stage project development and implementation. Ibra, can we move to the final slide? Some of the conclusions that I would like to put on the table. The success has been that we've now moved beyond the pilot phase. We're now in strong implementation. Much of the talk on Monday, Tuesday, and pretty much this morning was about policy, plans, and programs. But I think we are at the face of implementation. And you can see the results that are coming through in the projects and the commitment that's being demonstrated through many of the project owners and sponsors, and particularly the commitment from the RECs. One of the challenges that still remains with us is the lack of internal capacity to sustain and grow this. And we think the member states need to play an important role in this process, to make sure that sufficient funding and capacity is in place. Opportunity, major opportunity. I think we see many projects coming through the PIDA process and other regional projects. And I think now we have an instrument that can accelerate the delivery through a fast, cost-effective manner, and it can show results in the short term. I think in the future, what we can see, or what we will see out of NEPAD delivering on Africa's infrastructure feasibility and bankability of many projects. And I think that's going to be the conversation for the coming PIDA weeks. Thank you, Ibra.
Thank you so much, Morgan, for these case studies. And indeed, going forward, I think we will have now to work closely with all the regional economic communities, but also the countries on screening, analyzing, diagnosing, and PIDA PAP 2 projects, and then start our operation going forward, which is supporting the early stage preparation of those projects. This said, it concludes our presentation. Program Director, over to you. If there is any reaction or question from the audience, they can tap in, and if there is any of the project sponsor in the room, I think they can type the request, and then we can allow them to speak. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dr. Pillay and Ibra, for outlining in the first case what the SDM is, I want to use all the acronyms, but I'm just conscious that not everyone always knows exactly what they are, but what the service delivery mechanism is and what the quick check methodology is, and how the PIDA quality label is ultimately awarded to the different projects. Again, just to reiterate what Ibra said towards the end before passing the mic back to me, please, if you have questions, do type them into the chat, and in fact, and if you are indeed from one of the RECs or one of the stakeholders involved in the 4 projects that were spoken about, or indeed if you have a question about another project that we may field, please indicate that, and we will give you the floor. But just to get the ball rolling, I believe it was Ambassador Odembo speaking on behalf of Right Honorable Odinga earlier today, who mentioned the the fact that a lot of project preparation takes an excessively long time, and the reality is that we don't. Our need for infrastructure on the continent is such that we don't really have the luxury of wasting, and I put that in inverted commas, time with early project preparation, and need to start really implementing projects. I don't say that to diminish any of the work in the SDM, but actually to give importance to it. And so my question around that is, you mentioned that there were about 80 projects that began the screening process in 2020. And you also mentioned that to get to PIDA quality label 1, you only need about 30 days, of 30 consistent working days. So my question is, assuming these are the 4 projects that were awarded PIDA quality label 1, I believe they were, what is the challenge? Is it institutional complexities? Is it that the information just doesn't exist? Why I'm asking the question is, how can we improve the process for getting projects through the PIDA quality, through to PIDA quality label 1? It takes 30 days in theory, but in a year, only 4 projects of 80 moved through. I'm not sure who of the 2 of you will field that question.
Thank you, Simba. Let me give it a fair shot, but I think we have also another question in the chat, but I will start with yours, and certainly Morgan can complement. So what's the matter? Why is it a process that normally can take 35 days end up taking 3 months? That's what's happening. 3 main reasons. One reason is, which everyone would agree, that this year was particular in the sense that we have been working from our living room, or sometimes from the other room, you see. Sorry. So that's a really challenge. I mean, it's in normal circumstances, you deploy a team that will go, for example, in Nairobi or in Tanzania, sit with the EAC secretariat, work over 3 days, sort out issues, ask questions, solve the problem on the ground, and come back to Midrand here in South Africa. That's in normal circumstances. And this is not happening. So you have to rely on emails, you have to rely on virtual communication with all that's implied. And one of the linked issues that is not all offices, particularly in our public services, can have the constant internet connectivity where you can always make a video call, discuss the issue during a lengthy calls, etc., etc. What I'm trying to say is that really the communication has been a challenge this year, but it's not the only problem. The second issue is the information itself. Sometimes if you see the diagnostic, I show you, like I said, has hundreds of questions behind that visible part of the iceberg. So to have responses on those questions, you need more than one stakeholder. You need to engage with each and everyone who have been working on those projects, and sometimes the information availability is as expensive as gold, actually. And the third reasons that of delay is those projects. Some of those projects are old. If you take particularly some of our hydropower projects, discussion around those projects started in 1952, far before the independence of many of our countries. And then let me give you an example of a project that the initial studies, the initial recent studies were done in 1992. And it's only in 2008 that the study was revised. And then later on in 2018, and that AUD and NEPAD was approached to bring some stakeholders on board and move the project. So because of that nature, some of the documents, you cannot find them. The coordinating mechanism that exists among the stakeholders no longer exists. So you need to undertake from the scratch huge work in terms of creating the enabling environment so that the project can take into the ground. An additional reason on top of those three is also the complexity of the project. Morgan has highlighted the issue of non-objection and agreement from all countries. If you are dealing with a transboundary project, you need to have at least, in many cases in Africa, you need to have at least 3 countries on the table. So you have 2 options. Either you go country after country, or you find a way to put everyone in a room. It's easy, like I say, in the normal circumstances to convene a conference under the auspice of AUD and NEPAD with all the parties. But it's more challenging to bring each and everyone into a virtual conference. We are very glad that today, for example, we have over 60 people right now in this session. But it's not always easy when a particular ad hoc meeting to have this kind of participation level. I will hand over to Morgan, and then I will come back to the other question. Thank you.
Yeah, I think I just want to raise 2 points. One is the fact that one needs to have capacity at both the outer level, which we have now, and then obviously capacity at the project sponsor level. And having that capacity means that you can start having an exchange about very serious information and making decisions in the short term to move from one stage to the next. The second point relates to, you notice in the 4 case studies, I repeated implementing agency. The fact that you have an implementing agency means that we now have a contact point to work with. We have one stop where we can have the conversations, and we found that implementation agencies are absolutely good in getting mandates from the relevant participating member states and helping us to move the projects forward. I'll just give you an example. You know, in some cases where we issue commitment letters, it takes more than a month before we even get a response, because it's now being referred to different authorities within governments, and the bureaucracy starts to take over. So I think I can only underline that projects that have implementing authorities are likely to move through the stages a lot quicker than others that don't.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Let me please start addressing some of the question in the chat. The first question is, how can the SDM be made financially sustainable in the longer term, and how the internal capacity of the SDM to be boosted? I mean, this is a fundamental question for all project preparation facilities. Here is a dilemma. We are a development agency. We are development driven in one part. In the other part, project preparation is expensive. And if you want to be sustainable, somehow you need to think about how you can recover your cost. The dilemma is, if you start thinking about more and more about the recovery of your cost, you will tend to shift your focus to projects that you know in advance that you will recover your cost. And then you will use your inherent or your DNA, which is supporting developmental goals on the continent. So we are designing, and I think in one of the sessions we have illustrated that we are designing a cost recovery, a gradual cost recovery approach, where we think there is a part, as a development agency, part of our mandate, there is a part that we do need to be able to provide that. The initial screening of project, AUD and NEPAD need to be able to do that, and we will keep doing that. Now, when project move to the downstream level, where you have a financial process involved, that way partnership with bigger project operation facilities will get involved, and that's where we are thinking about what is the optimal way to build synergy and the collaboration and recover the cost. And the issue around capacity within the AUD and EPIDA, I think globally at the African Union level, institutional capacity is taken very seriously. So that's one. And secondly, partners also of AUD and EPIDA also pay attention to that issue of capacity. But more importantly, what I want to say that one of the methods we are applying to mitigate the issue of capacity is really establishing that pool of experts, because it's very expensive to have an A team specifically designed for project preparation within a development agency. But you can have a pool of expertise that can operate in to complement the existing capacity that can operate for targeted and expert level operations. This is the first question. I don't know, Morgan, if you'd like to complement. Okay.
Yeah, just to complement on that, I think part of what Ibra is saying to ensure sustainability, we are also participating in the PIDA 2's financing strategy, and we're looking at ways in which that strategy could make sure that the SDM mechanism can be sustainable, at the same time consider what Ibra is saying about recovering the operating costs to provide the services. I think there was another question that related to the capital costs, I think, in terms of once you've provided support for project preparation and now the project is moving towards implementation and towards financial close, what assistance can be provided? And now there was a lot of discussion in the first day in terms of CBN, the Continental Business Network. Now, part of what happens inside AUDA is that you have the SDM and you have the CBM. And the SDM will provide projects, will provide a pipeline of projects to the CBN to consider and assist those projects to link it to the providers of funders, whether they're DFIs, whether they're private investors or commercial banks, or to assist whether it's PPP type finance. So that would be the kind of role that AUDA would play via the CBN, facilitating the linkages to finance. There is no provision for AUDA to actually provide funding itself, but rather to play a strong facilitation role with the network. And that's why the CBN as a network is very important. And a big part of the network, I think, is going to be the African pension funds and the sovereign wealth funds that do exist, because in numerous occasions last year, we had conversations about them being interested in the infrastructure asset class and the potential for investments. Now, again, we come to the point about projects that are well prepared, that have the necessary information, will form the basis for attracting funding. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Pillay. Just an additional point in that question regarding the funding. I think in terms of the, for example, the participant asked, there might be a risk of inefficiency if we retreat from project after the preparation phase. So like PIDA is a synergy. PIDA is really a result of a collaboration. And for those who have followed the PIDA implementation and strategy presentation earlier today, you can see that each institution, be it the development agencies or development finance institutions, will have a role to play. So for example, I will take just an illustration. The African Development Bank is hosting the NEPAD project preparation facility, which is a very large contributor to the financing of the preparation, the financing of our regional infrastructure project on the continent. One of our roles is to ensure that PIDA projects are supported at the early stage from AUD and NEPAD and channeled to the African Development Bank for the downstream preparation. And within the bank, there is a team designed evidently for the financing, for the funding aspect. So there is a whole channel, and there is a clear also attempt to share roles and responsibility among the PIDA stakeholders. And I do believe that that coordinated mechanism will ensure that even though we play a role at the early stage, there will be other institutions that will take the next step forward and avoid the inefficiency that the gentleman or the lady is referring in his or her question. Thank you so much, and over to Program Director.
Yes, thank you to you both for addressing those questions. I, in particular, want to sort of underscore the points you have made around the collaborations and the fact that Outer NEPAD doesn't prepare a project only to then drop it and forget about it, but part of its mandate is to then try and get it to the funding stage. And to Yuli Steger, that was the response to your particular question. But if you'll allow me to play, is it devil's advocate? Perhaps, yeah. Or at least be a little bit provocative. So much has been made about the fact that infrastructure as an asset class is, in previous discussions throughout the week, is becoming more and more important. Indeed, Dr. Pillay, you stated that pension funds and sovereign wealth funds are increasingly becoming interested in that. People have given the examples of Canada and Australia, whose pension funds and or sovereign wealth funds are interested more and more in infrastructure as an asset class. Additionally, one of the sort of recurrent themes throughout the week has been the fact that project preparation is critical. Broadly speaking, the money exists to fund a lot of projects. The problem is the projects are not ready. And so my question is, does this mean that we in the audience can sort of hold Outer NEPAD, I don't know if it's Outer NEPAD specifically, but in terms of, I don't know if accountability is the right word, but do we expect in the next few years to be seeing more and more of these projects coming online, being that they're getting this robust project preparation support from Outer NEPAD, and that the funding is less likely to be a problem than this project preparation fund? So should we be expecting more projects to be coming online, or projects to be coming online at a greater rate in the years to come? That's my question.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think the process that we put in place is a world-class process. Similarly, international organizations across the world are using a similar set of tools to analyze and produce the relevant data that investors and financiers can see. Certainly, we need to build a few linkages and bridges to the financiers, so we can put the projects on their tables so that they can do their due diligence and come to the conclusion that these projects meet their kind of risk rate return. The big issue I think we need to put on the table is that in the PIDA PUP 2, increasingly you will see the shift towards projects that are climate sensitive, that are sensitive towards the SDGs, and increasingly the pressure on the world and particularly financiers is going to become increasingly intense in the next few years. And what does that mean? That means that they've got to come to the party. They've got to find the niches where they're going to finance and which projects, because there are certain embedded benefits for them in terms of climate credits, financing points, a certain compliance requirements, etc. And then on the side of Outer, to be able to facilitate the best possible projects that comes out of the system. I mean, I think we must be realistic. Not all projects are going to make it through the system. Those that do make it, I think, stand a very strong chance of making it through. I mean, some of the pre-feasibilities that we've looked at are showing higher rates of return at the pre-feasibility stage. And these all bode well for the African infrastructure portfolio. So certainly, I think that facilitation role is going to be important. Building the bridge to the financiers is going to be important. And making information available, having information asymmetry, particularly on the intimate project data that financiers require to make the decisions, is going to be the next stage of how we take the CBN forward in building those partnerships. Thank you.
Yes, thank you for that response. And I just want to, it's an interesting point you make around the fact that ESG, environmental and social governance, is becoming an increasingly important decision criterion for the different potential investors ultimately. And in that context, I would like to know, while the projects you've discussed here are projects that have come through the PIDA PAP2, I beg your pardon, through the PIDA processes, the PIDA PAP process, can you just talk a little bit about the applicability? Are you using some of these tools for non-PIDA projects? If so, why? And how do you then select some of those projects?
Yeah, thank you so much, Simba. So, by principle, like the methodology can be applied to a project which is not part of the PIDA project. Like I said, PIDA project is only a list of projects among many other projects, but their difference is that they have been selected by Africa as its priority for the next decade. Now, do we apply the SDM to other projects? It can be applied, but for now, we are focused on the priority that the continents have. And if we can be optimistic, we can say if we manage to close the need of PIDA project, so if we manage to go beyond our priority, evidently, we can look on something else. But in principle, our focus is PIDA project, because that's the focus of the African Union. Thank you.
Dr. Pillay, I'm just checking you don't have anything to add to that.
No, I think Ibra covered it quite well. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. I'm not seeing any more questions in the chat, and I have not seen any raised hands from participants unless I am missing some of those hands. But I do have myself a question that popped up right at the beginning, which is related in sort of part to Luca Volonté's question about capacity. And that question, if I can find where I wrote it, yes. What's clear is that project preparation is a challenge. And Ibra, you specifically stated in your right at the beginning, you specifically stated how it is a particular challenge right at the earliest stages of the project. And so my question is, in the work you've done, looking at some of these 80 projects and carrying these 4 projects right through to that PQL stage 1, PIDA quality label stage 1 stage, what have you learned in terms that we can, I suppose, scale? My question is, project owners who have projects, what can they do to progress their projects more quickly through this project preparation phase? Yeah, I don't know if I've made sense.
Yeah, definitely makes sense. So what can project owners do to accelerate or to facilitate the process? And what have we learned? We learned, I think, 2 to 3 lessons. One is internal coordination within the organization is very important, and we cannot we can constantly emphasize on that. It's very important that the project has an implementing agency. But when that agency exists, it's even more critical that within the team that are tasked on specific project, there is a kind of coordination and the kind of process of channeling information within the organization as well. Secondly, responsiveness. I think it's very important that the task manager or the designated official appointed to liaise on the SDM process, on the project preparation process, on the application process, that communicate. From our side, we are only here to help, but our help is most of the time demand driven. So for example, if we share the application form with you, if you don't send it back with specific issues, we cannot know that you have those issues. While we are really available to even, we are in a situation where we can even schedule meeting with project sponsor and we go through the application form together, and then we fill the application form together with them. So we are available, but we need to have that feedback. So responsiveness is very important. And finally, and this is a common responsibility for all the PIDA stakeholders, it's a matter of information availability. The information might be available, but the storage of the information is very critical. Sometimes you don't know where that feasibility study is. You have to, and if it exists, maybe there is no electronic copy of it. So it's very critical that we find, like I said, it's a shared responsibility. It's very critical going forward that we strengthen the PIDA Virtual Information Center, VP, so that we, on any given project, that we will be able to gather information. And I'm very happy that, very glad that PIDA PAP2 process has taken the issue of information gathering very seriously. And the process was so methodic that it's very hard to take a project from the PIDA PAP2 list, even though the list is not yet approved. For those of us who work on it, it's very hard to take a project and realize that there is no information on the project. So we are confident, I think, going forward, the issue of information will be resolved. Thank you so much.
Yeah, if I can just add, I think 4 points. I think we've raised the issue of implementing agencies. What is important about their role is that they need to have a very clear, defined mandate about making decisions, particularly relating to the project and how the resources get spent and how they move the project forward, and their consultation with the relevant countries they're working with. Point number 2 relates to the skills deficit, particularly I think in some of the member state government departments that interacts with the implementing agents. I think there, if you don't have the skills level at the right stage and level, it becomes difficult for the communication of critical reports and so forth. And I know we talk about documentation like non-objection agreements or joint funding of certain studies, etc., etc. Those become extremely difficult to get through the systems. Item 3 talks to financing. Now, a lot of what we do in early stage project preparation requires a lot of money. It has to be financed upfront. In some occasions, the support and the financing does not yield the results, but in many cases it does. So you need to have a mechanism through which you can either recoup, or you have a contribution from member states, or there is a fund of some sort created to be able to keep this alive and sustainable over a long period of time. And the last point I think I want to make is a lot of our process is evidence-based. So if we ask a particular question about a particular dimension, obviously there's a document that goes with it. If you're unable to provide that, then we do not leave the process hanging. We now engage with the implementation authority or the project owner to see, why this gap exists, how do we fill the gap so that we can fill that gap and move on. So those, I think, would be the 4 specific lessons learned in the implementation of this. Thank you.
And thank you to you both for those responses. We now have several, I think it's 3 questions that have come in from the audience. And so I'll go to the first question. Conscious of time, can I just ask you just to keep your responses as short as possible? And the first question from Jean Madzongwe from SAPP is, I missed the discussion on CBN, which I think may have been the previous session, but you did refer to it in this session. The question was, who manages it, who funds it, does it provide debt and equity, and what are the conditions for funding? If one of you could just address those questions quickly.
Yeah, maybe I should come in on that. A CBN is a mechanism where the secretariat function is provided by our NEPAD, and then it's chaired by an external chair, and it has members that forms part of the CBN council. Now, the main work of the council is to form a bridge between the projects that come out of the PIDA process or the AUDA process, and link those projects to potential funders or funding mechanisms that exist in the environment. The role of the CBN is not to fund or to provide debt or equity to any projects, but rather to assist those projects that are mature, that can attract private sector funding particularly, and take that project together with its information and then take it to the relevant players in the market, do some market sounding, as it were, and also present it to potential investors as an opportunity. So that would be primarily the role. The CBN does have many other functions. I'm not going to get into the detail, but I think if the person wants more detail, there is a presentation on the website where you can access the other roles that the CBN plays within the infrastructure space. Thank you. Ibra, maybe you want to complement that.
Thank you so much, Dr. Pillay. Thank you, Jean, for the question. I think you have summarized it very well, so I wouldn't want to use again our precious time on that. But thank you so much, Jean, for the question. And indeed, the presentation on the CBN are available on the website. But we can also continue the conversation. I think we have been communicating on some other aspect through the year, and I'm very happy that you join us and we can continue the conversation even after this meeting.
Thank you for the responses. And so Anonymous in the chat asks an interesting question, which is, how will PIDA mobilize funding for the project prep, and what are the allocations per project? The reason they ask this question is, for example, NEPAD IPPF tries to cover many projects and therefore provides limited funding and resources per project, i.e. there is a cap on project preparation. The real question that Anonymous is asking then is it not better to provide funding to complete studies for 1 or 2 really good projects rather than spreading the funding thinly across many projects?
Interesting. Thank you so much, Simba, for convening this question. Just to one aspect before I provide some element of response. I have my colleague online, Teach, and Teach, please, after my response, if you feel this is very important and it's linked to the PIDA implementation / PIDA financing strategy, please feel free to jump into the conversation. So would it be better to simply fund a limited number of projects and to full feasibility instead of splitting the relatively small amount of resources we have across the institution? This is an option indeed. So maybe the way I should respond is that, at least for PIDA PAP2, the way we think is through collaborative process, we can really leverage our respective strength and to mobilize funding for those projects. That's one. Secondly, even within the NEPAD IPPF, the NEPAD Infrastructure Project Preparation Facility, since LD and NEPAD sits within its oversight committee, NEPAD IPPF prioritize actually the list of the submission they receive. So despite the prioritization, again, I understand that you would appreciate that the amount or the demand is so high that NEPAD IPPF alone, frankly speaking, will require further funding to tackle those big project preparation costs. Now, what would be the solution? I think, even though, like I said, NEPAD IPPF has proven to be very supportive of those regional infrastructure projects. If we analyze the figures in terms of investment that they have catalyzed through the small amount that they managed to mobilize. But I think it's really a call to both government, but also to all the partners, but most importantly to project financiers, that to look into the issue of project preparation. Some of the investors or some of the providers of capital are so comfortable in waiting to have like the end product, something that is finished. But I think it's very important that those financiers now start collaborating with project preparation facilities and get involved at the upper stream of the upper level of the project preparation, so that they can be able to have a nicer pipeline of projects. Like I said, Teach, if you have some point to complement on this, please jump in. Thank you. Over to you, Teach.
Yeah.
Colleagues, thank you, Ibra. I think you've really captured it well, but I think it would be also important that in addition to seeing how we can maximize the utilization of our limited resources, it's worthwhile noting that earlier on you stated that the SDM is looking at a component of cost recovery, so that at least we are able to recycle that capital. But in addition to that, we are also broadening the sources of finance that are available to us. And one of the things that the financing strategy will consider is to look at asset recycling, so that at least those projects we find a way of recycling those projects that would have reached finished construction, reached of the operation stage, so that we can then free that capital to be invested in other projects. So I think ultimately what will happen is that as we are still working on the financing strategy, some of these issues will be addressed as part of the recommendations that will come out of the financing strategy. So those will be my contributions for now, but hopefully we will, once the AFDB is done with the financing strategy, then we will be able to share with the participants those recommendations that will come out of it. But also, I think since the bank is part of this PIDA week, this recommendation will also be considered during the development of the financing strategy. Thank you, Ibra. And thank you,
Simba, can I come in?
Yes, very quickly.
Yeah, I think to try and tackle that question is a matter of strategy, and it's of strategic importance to what happens in respect of accelerating projects in Africa. I mean, you have so many projects. If you look at the potential list for PIDA PAP2, it's in excess of 100 projects. So, I think we would be very short-sighted just to choose one or two and focus all our resources there. That would not be accelerating the program in any way. So the idea here is that we are dealing with many of the projects that may be already in a very advanced stage that needs to be, quickly, pushed through the pipeline towards implementation and financial close. And there may also very well be many projects in the concept, pre-feasibility and feasibility stage. And I think that's the area where the SDM needs to focus. It needs to broaden. It needs to give as many projects as possible a chance to get beyond these building blocks and to see the light of day. So I think strategically, that's where we need to position. And all of this is based on having the necessary resources. I think what we're putting on the table today is that we now have developed the tools to become more efficient. What we need now is to address possibly some of the funding and the capacity issues so that we can do this and scale this up to a point where we can start to see the momentum and the impact of large-scale delivery of some of the bigger projects on the continent. Thank you, Simba.
Yeah, and thank you to all three of you for those responses sort of around our strategic approach to why we're doing this in the first place, how much we want to influence projects and general development, the role that financiers should be playing, and at what point they should enter the conversation in terms of financing projects, but also just our own strategies around finance and partnerships, which thanks to you, apparently those questions were from Jean Madzongwa as well, apparently. But that brings me, we have not much time left and we will run over, I apologize, but we have a question about our choice of partners. Could you touch on a little bit on the role of AU partners from Asia and South America in project preparation specifically? Ultimately, the question is, do you have any engagement with Asian and South American partners, or is it primarily European and North American partners?
Thank you so much. And I will provide an element of response. And like I said, we do have other colleagues in the room. So after my response, I will check if Dr. Chela is available also to complement. So evidently, there is engagement with Asian countries and South American countries at the AU level. One of the cooperation I can speak for is through with Japan through TICAD, and with China also through FOCAC. And most recently, there have been engagement with within the Brazil-Africa Forum. And but in terms of specific engagement pertaining to the service delivery mechanism or the early stage project preparation, I think we are yet to break down that high level engagement, which clearly in many of the deliberation recognize the importance of supporting project preparation across the continent. So one of our tasks now going forward, I think rightfully you mentioned the point, is to engage at technical level and break down the conversation and the craft partnership in the framework of PIDA PAP2. But like I said, we do have Dr. Chela in the room, and Dr. Chela, please, if you are available, jump into the conversation. Okay, she is. Thank you.
All right, yeah, that she hasn't jumped in, I'm going to take that. Thank you, Ibra, for that response. And so with that, we move to the final question that's here indicated in the chat before we wrap up the session. And that question is from Engineer Charles Sabiti. And that question to you, Ibra, is, as my ES said, we have a project proposed in the complete strategic plan for the Central Corridor, and we would like some of these projects to form part of the PIDA 2 or to be part of this pipeline of projects. Can you advise us how we should proceed to meet the deadlines for this?
Thank you so much. Thank you, Engineer Sabiti, for your question. If I understand it very well, the question is about CCTTFA having a pipeline or a list of projects that they would like to channel it through PIDA 2. If that's correct, if my understanding is correct, my recollection is that right now, the submission for PIDA 2 has been concluded. All in all, the PIDA 2 task force, which is made of AFDB, UNECA, AUD, NEPAD, and the regional economic communities, have received over 240 projects through a very collaborative process with all the countries and with all the regional economic blocks and power pools at some point. And then from those 244 projects, a priority list have been proposed to the Special Technical Committee of the African Union for infrastructure, energy, tourism, and transport, etc. And then from those 73 projects, the last STC meeting was held, and the conclusion of that meeting will be submitted to the African Union General Assembly of Head of State and Government, which will make a decision to approve or to amend. But we are very hopeful that the PIDA 2 list will be approved by February. So long story short, Engineer Sabiti, I think the process of submitting the project to PIDA 2 is completed already. But as we mentioned, I think in the morning, that PIDA 2 is a dynamic process. So along the road, we will take stock to evaluate the progress, and who knows, maybe there will be opening for additional lists. But Teach, please, as the task leader from our side on the PIDA 2 process, please feel free to complete what I just said. Thank you.
I think you are right. I mean, the process of submitting projects has been closed now, but the engineer submitted can access the list of projects that were submitted in the East African region via the PIDA 2 website, and he can view all those projects. And so at this stage, we are not at liberty to speculate and what projects have been shortlisted until they have been approved by the heads of state. But for information's sake, all the projects that were submitted to during the process are available in the PIDA 2 website. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Teach. I think we have additional questions, Simba. Over to you, Program Director.
Yes, thank you. It looks to me like a comment from Christian Kingombe of the 4IP group, which is, have a look at the website he links to as a solution for addressing the lack of funding at early stage of project preparation. This is an innovative approach. This innovative approach is addressing many of the constraints being discussed at today's session by bringing in financiers and project owners / sponsors together at the early stages to help overcome the early stage funding constraints. The approach is being pioneered in Niger and Nigeria, and this year will be used in Morocco and in Vietnam. Christian, thank you very much for that intervention. To those who are interested, the website is www.imppact.org. And I think that segues nicely into a way of wrapping up and closing the session, because in the
sorry, Program Director, just I want to comment on what Christian just said. I think it's very important, and it's really highlighting the collaboration that one of the participants that mentioned it. So I would like just to ensure Christian that we will follow up with his team, and we will explore how we can learn a lot from that 4IP process, and see how we can collaborate together in tackling the issue of early stage project preparation. Thank you so much. Over to you.
Thank you, Ibra. Yeah, because for me, that sort of speaks to one of the points you made earlier when you actually said in speaking that we should look to having the project finances earlier in the preparation of the pipeline and the development of the pipeline of projects, and not just standing in a queue at the tap. So for me, that's this is a particularly interesting route to follow. But thank you all for your contributions this afternoon here in South Africa, where I am, morning or evening, or afternoon where you are as well. But just to sort of summarize some of the things that I have noted in this session, one key element in projects moving forward is, particularly at these early stages, is to have the correct sort of institutional arrangement. That is to say, there needs to be a clear implementing agency, which is itself is internally well coordinated, so that the flow and availability and management of information about projects is done in such a way that, you know, interested parties in helping develop the project preparation can move forward. As an additional remark, I found it quite interesting that we don't necessarily have a skills deficit per se, but sometimes the skills are located at the wrong places within these institutions and organizations, which can lead to levels of bottlenecking. But yeah, notwithstanding some of these challenges, the SDM in 2020 has been able to move 4 projects right through to PQL stage 1 of the 80 that started, notwithstanding the challenges around the logistics of COVID and availability of information. And so to the team working on it, I wish to extend my congratulations, and I think the audience would share those congratulations. Ibra, if you'd like to have a few words just to close off the session.
Thank you so much. Okay, thank you so much, Program Director Simba. Thank you, Dr. Pillay, for being with us through the conversation, and thanks to each and everyone who have been contributing either by their time or by their insight. Thank you for the great question, and it's really a pleasure to be with you throughout these last, I think, 90 minutes. And so, like we mentioned in one of the sessions, I think the SDM is still on a learning curve, and we will improve as we do, and we will play a very, we are conscious of the very important role that we will have to play in the PIDA PAC2 process, but still PIDA process is a collaborative process, and we will work with all the partners and stakeholders to ensure that the project have been given due preparation and support so that they can reach financing and then implementation for the benefit of Africa, for the benefits of the people of Africa. Thank you so much for the great conversation, and looking forward to engaging further in our platform. Thank you so much. Bye.
Thank you, Dr. Pillay. Would you like a few closing words?
No, I just want to say thank you to the questions and the participants. I think it's been a learning experience for us at AUDA as well. So we also taking in many of the comments and the thoughts that have been put to us by the comments, and hopefully this will just make the SDM process and the various instruments more robust and more efficient. Thank you.
And again, thank you to you, Dr. Pillay, and thank you to you, Mr. Wahabu, for your contributions and presentations this afternoon. Thank you to all of you who listened, and thank you to all of you who sent through questions and comments. Thank you, Tichakunda Simbini, as well, for your contributions this afternoon. And I wish to just remind everybody that this session, as with all the others, is available on the PIDA website. That's au-pida.org, and you can just click the link in the header and it'll take you through to the PIDA Week page, where all the sessions and their recordings are to be found, as well as some of the presentations. And with that, I wish you all a good evening. Shukran, merci, obrigado, asante sana.